Public Wi-Fi can actually be very, very dangerous. And if you don't really know the significance of how public Wi-Fi can be so dangerous to you and your loved ones, I'm here to explain. There are many techniques that hackers can deploy to get your credentials on your devices, such as man-in-the-middle attacks, DNS spoofing, ARP spoofing. There are a lot more, but we're just going to go over the common ones today. The first one we're going to go over is man-in-the-middle attacks. Man-in-the-middle attacks are primarily attacks that are used to eavesdrop on somebody. So for example, let's say I go onto a network and this network has a lot of packets being sent and received. Let's just say someone else was trying to get into this conversation that we're having between these packets. They can use a man-in-the-middle attack to pretty much eavesdrop into our conversation by listening to the packets or watching the packets that are going through the network. This is how hackers receive your passwords, usernames, and other sensitive information on your account. They look at the packets sending through, and if they're not encrypted, well, it's like them reading a novel inside a bookstore. It's open to everybody. Another attack that hackers can employ is something called a session hijacking. Session hijacking is pretty much where a hacker steals the session ID of whatever you're on. So for example, a banking app, they can steal the session ID that you're currently in, and they can impersonate you by logging in with your information and just staying on that website until they get off. Meaning they don't even need your username or password. They can just impersonate you and steal the session ID and get all your information like that. But they're only able to do that if you're on their Wi-Fi router that's infected with malware. This one's very dangerous because in the previous video, we talked about how to keep your passwords safe from hackers. Well, in this situation, they don't even need your password. All they need is for you to get on their infected malware so that way they can see your session ID. This is also very dangerous because if they get on your session ID, they can stay in there for as long as they need to, meaning you're not able to get back into your account until they get off. Another attack that hackers employ is something called a rogue access point. So a rogue access point is when a hacker sets up a fake router and they pretty much have the router the same name as, for example, Starbucks' router, just maybe a little bit different. They're hoping for people to get on that router. That way they can steal all their information. A lot of people don't realize this because a lot of times people, they go on their public Wi-Fi and they just look for the name of the router that's connected to the business. Hackers know this, so they will purposely put the name for that establishment for you to click on it, hoping that you're gonna receive Wi-Fi. And you might actually get Wi-Fi, but this is ultimately bad because your session is being stolen and your credentials at the same time. So it's important for us to not only recognize these signs out in public, like if we're at an airport, making sure that we're on the correct airport Wi-Fi router. And it's also important for us to look at it in a standpoint of, do I really need to be on this router on Wi-Fi? Can I use my 5G? Can I use my data? Can I use my hotspot? Is there anything else I can use except for this Wi-Fi? And if the Wi-Fi is the only resolution, then that's when you can use it. Now, another way hackers can get your information by you getting into a public Wi-Fi is by using something called a DNS spoof. A DNS spoof is primarily where they will make a fake website for you to go to. For example, let's say you're trying to go to apple.com and you're actually meaning to go to Apple. Well, they will alter the domain name system of that website, and then they will have that spoof into thinking that their website is the actual Apple website that you're getting to. When you're trying to go to this apple.com, you're really going to the malicious website that they have for you. Even though you put apple.com, a lot of times when we're out in public Wi-Fi, we're probably going to YouTube, Google, maybe we're trying to get to our bank account. A lot of these hackers already have pre-filled websites that look exactly like the websites we're trying to attempt to get into. And so all they have to do is just set that up and wait for you to get into the malicious router that they already set up at the airport or at the Starbucks or wherever you're at that's public with free Wi-Fi. Now, a lot of you guys may think, what does this have to do with me? I don't have anything dangerous on my phone. I don't have anything that could be life-threatening on my phone that could ruin my life, even if it's stolen. Well, yeah, you do. You have your information. Information is everything to hackers. You guys have to understand it from an adversary's mindset. If they don't get your passwords or your usernames, if they just get a name, that's all that counts. If they get a date of birth, that's what it really counts. And if they get anything that's social or anything that pertains to where you live, addresses, or maybe credit card information, all that is a lot more damaging to you. The little things add up. It's the names, the date of births, where you live, all the way up to your credit card information. Now, what do they do with this information, you may ask? They use this information to sell on the dark net, or they use this information to blackmail you and to also sell it to others that can blackmail you. And they do this to pretty much everyone, the masses. It's not just you they're after everybody, or anything that they can get their hands on for money. You guys have to think in a hacker's mindset. A hacker does this either for three things: nation state, so they're trying to take someone down, propaganda, or for money. These hackers, these little small independent people who work just for themselves, they do this to sell your information to just get a little bit of money. That's what they do. And it's kind of sad, but it's the reality that we live in. And a lot of you guys may think, how does my information really benefit anybody else? I'm not a big shot CEO. I'm not as important as Jeff Bezos. Well, you don't have to be the big top shot caller in a company in order for your life to get ruined. There are so many cases that are documented and undocumented of people losing financials, losing so much due to them being negligent on a website that they had really no idea that wasn't an authentic website. There was a story I was reading where in Cleveland, they had a cyber conference. And at the cyber conference, they had these fake routers, also known as evil twin routers, and they had them set up around the conference. You know, there was probably one across the street at the grocery store. There was probably one actually at the convention. And these routers, they pretty much were set up to be maliciously filled. Now, obviously it was in a controlled environment, so they weren't actually maliciously filled, but they were being monitored by people who actually set them up. And what's surprising is that a lot of people at this cyber conference actually connected to these Wi-Fi routers. Now, a lot of these routers had ridiculous names like Google Starbucks, I Love Trump, but surprisingly, a lot of people, over 1,200 people exactly, opted into this Wi-Fi router. Over 68% of the people on the Wi-Fi had their identities exposed. And over 44% of those people had their messages checked, including WhatsApp and private messages and iMessages. They just need you to log into the I Love Trump Wi-Fi routers, and then they're good. That's all they need you to do. Now, mind you, this convention was probably an all-day thing. So you could imagine how much data could have been stolen if it was an actual real attack. Now, they made it very clear that all the data didn't go anywhere and it was all erased. But this study proved that there's a lot of people who are just not cyber aware, even going to a cyber conference. And a lot of these people had their identities exposed without even realizing it. And it doesn't matter if they don't use your information that day. It could be months and years until they use that data. Until one day you are just going to work on a normal day and then you have all your information stolen. And now you have people like the IRS trying to get a hold of you because of identity fraud. So it's very important that we look at the names of the routers that we're on, and we're actually checking the routers that we're on. Now, how do you do that? VPNs. VPNs stand for virtual private networks. These virtual private networks, they make a encryption tunnel with your data, like packets and anything that's being sent through the network, and they make it so that way a hacker can't see it. Everything that you're sending is unreadable, hence why it's encrypted. The only way they can see this is if it's decrypted. Now you may be thinking, why doesn't everyone use a VPN? I don't know. A VPN is very, very essential to have on a public Wi-Fi network. If a hacker tries to read your information, even if they get the information, they can't see it. Another thing you can do is asking the staff, what's the actual Wi-Fi router that you're supposed to be using? A lot of times we just look at these Wi-Fi routers and we're just thinking, oh, well, since we're at the Hilton hotels, the Wi-Fi router should be Hilton Hotel 12, right? Well, you have to think to yourself, why is it 12? Are there 12 routers? So it's always best to look at the actual Wi-Fi router that is displayed at the lobby, or maybe through your room key or in person. It's always best to just ask. And another way how you can keep yourself safe is by using two-factor authentication. Because even if you do all the steps that were previously spoken of before, you still have two-factor authentication on, which means even if they steal your username and password, they're still going to run into that roadblock where they need to authenticate themselves with a second means of identification. If you don't have that, then they can just get into your account. But if you have that, then your password is useless. So public Wi-Fi's are dangerous. Do I use them? Sometimes, but I always make sure I have a VPN on, and I'm always making sure that whatever router I'm connecting to is the authenticated, appropriate router that I'm supposed to be using. Because a lot of times, they don't really care about this stuff. But in reality, it's everything, and it should be everything. They will sell your information, and they will sell it to the highest bidder, and that person will use that information to steal more information from you. To get a VPN and look at the router that you're actually using when you're on a public Wi-Fi network. With that being said, I'm Julian Swain, aka NS, and I'm out.